Hey, this is your boy DD from the closet. I'm the guy who's the DM, goes by DD, and I'm in a closet. I'm literally in a closet. I'm sitting on the floor of the closet. It's kind of comfortable. Don't worry about me. Don't worry about me. I worry about yourself. Worry about yourself. All right, today I'm drinking another non-alcoholic beer. This is from Athletic Brewing Company, I think in Colorado. I think they just specialize in NAs. I don't think they do anything alcoholic because they athletic and they can't have any alcohol because they athletic. So this is the Cerveza Atletica. So it is I don't know if they're trying to go for some sort of Mexican style beer is what they called it. There's not much else description to it. As you can see, it's a lovely brown. I put some lemons in it. I've been putting citrus in all of these beers because there's just something lacking and that kind of masks it all. And honestly, not too bad. You get your beer fix. So today I want to talk to you about something that is difficult, and I want to try to help you get it better. That is DM Improv, Dungeon Master Improv. How do you DM on the fly? Not to say that you're completely unprepared, but perhaps your players they go somewhere you're not ready for. You're not ready for them to go there, but they go there and you're like, oh, please don't go there. And they're like, where to go in here? Why you have nothing to say about it? Well, first of all, you do have something to say about it, though there's nothing wrong with saying I haven't prepared that. Let's not do it. I try to always be game, because that's how I roll. But you don't have to be that way. But this is how you could help yourself be more game and up for things that are happening. Anyway, so from the notebook, putting it down. It's really no good place to put it. The closet. No good to put it in the closet. So the first thing, the biggest and first thing you need to do in order to improv is to know your world. Talked a little bit about in world building, how you get to know the different relationships in your world between groups and factions, and that not only gives you ample material for uh gives you ample material for quests. It also helps with the role playing aspect. So say for instance, in my world, like a big thing is that humans are either enslaved or they're like running around in the jungle or they're dead or some are still in exile in former allies' territories. So characters being a human has consequence. Meeting a human has consequence, and there's all sorts of things that go with it. Everyone has a different reaction to a human. And because of the war that happens in my campaign, like campaign takes place decades after the war, but there's still these kinds of groups and factions that have aligned themselves accordingly, depending on what country they're from and who they fought with in the war. So things like that. Know your allies and enemies of all the different places in your world. Now, say you haven't done a huge world. Maybe you're just in a city. Maybe your world is very small. You can still have your groups and factions, and they just are smaller. You can still have people, like maybe the mayor. He's running for re-election, and he has to come and greet a bunch of people, like win over votes, but he's at odds with the mafia or whatever. Something weird like that. And you can have these things. The key is having these things continually going on in the background. Always be thinking about what the NPCs are doing. And when you do that, if the PCs want to interact randomly across, that, oh, we want to hop the border and go to that country, instead of being like, that was just a weird shape on a map with a random name I picked, actually being able to go back to what you've done, what you've built in your world, who lives there, How long have they lived there? What are significant historical events? Those events, maybe they have anniversaries. You can do quests based on that. You can have people who are like, veterans of a war, or maybe survivors of some sort of famine, or things like that. So there's always something to fall back on, and that's your history. Your history of your world is what you can fall back on, and then how different groups have emerged and intermingled, if you will, and or interacted with other groups. How they've emerged in that history and dealt with the issues of their day. That will help you get a sense of it will get a sense of like a foundation if you are suddenly thrust into an improv situation. So, like, we had the example about the war and all that stuff. Suppose they go to a city, and what is the city? It's the capital of this country. Parliament's in session. You have issues of the day they're bringing up. You have different sides of the equation. For, against, all this stuff, and the PCs can kind of fall into that. It's easy. You'll be rewarded if you put a little front end work into world building, just enough so that you understand who lives where and the history and what's been going on generally. And your players will have fun with it. You will not appear like you're improving at all, because you do have a knowledge of who you're talking about and what you're talking about. The other reason why it's good to know your history and your world is because it will help you keep motives and like bad guys and stuff in track. Nothing is worse than like throwing a random encounter in there, and this bad guy all of a sudden shows up, and like what is he? And then you have to go back later and somehow like shove him in the plot, and so it wasn't just a complete waste of time, and you can kind of play it off. You're like, yeah, I planned this the whole time. You'll find that you're able to shove those random characters in quite easily on the fly if you know your history of your world, and you can create someone out of thin air who existed in some event, during some time with some group. So put the work into, not necessarily on paper, here's how many people live in this city, here's how many languages they speak, it's this percent that, this percent this, and they have their fig festival and this day of this month, and then they have the shoot each other festival this day, this month. You don't have to do that. You can sprinkle in some flavor like that, but you should not be spending more than a few sentences per area just to get an idea of what's happened there. In some areas, you can even leave blank. And if you understand the people that live there, yeah, the place could just be a shape on a map. But if you know who's in it, you can tie that into your greater story if you know their motives. And it always goes back to NPC motives, doesn't it? That's what we talked about last time in the battle. So that's NPC motives on a small scale with the battle, and then on a grander scale with improv and how you're able to do it on the fly. Because it's kind of redundant to say that. But anyway, looking at my notebook. All right. So that is the biggest thing. If there's anything you take away from this, is know your world, know the people and factions, groups, and ice cream sundae. Also, don't be afraid to allow your player, and I said this also in the world building, don't be afraid to allow your players to throw their own flavor on something. We have a joke in our game where someone will say something, it's a little ridiculous, but then I'll just say it's canon now, and then that's it. We've mostly developed foods that way, like perf donuts and daggeroonies, which are cookies from Daggeroon, and little bits and pieces of weird stuff like that has been sprinkled in. So that's where That's why, you can, like, you can give it to your players a little bit. You'd be like, hey, what do you want to do? You know, exactly. So moving on, this is a more of a trick. Than you, and it doesn't really take much practice. Write NPC names down. I'll refer you once more to fantasynamegenerators.com. Great site. I think they plant trees with their ad money, something like that. They have a tree counter in the corner. It's, I like their site. It's a cool site. Turn off your ad blocker for that. So, no, like, have these at the ready. Do it by race. So here's my elven names. Here are my human names. Here are my dwarven names. Here are my tabaxi names. Here are my full of crap names. So that way you can. I like to keep consistency in the naming convention of all the different races, which is why I use fantasy name generators. Is because they kind of keep each race separate as far as how the names sound and kind of the endings and whatnot. So some people just say to write down names. You can do that, but I like to still separate it by race. And you still might be only making one list depending on where you are. If you're in the elven country, you're probably gonna have just elf names. So, but it helps on the fly. And what I do, you have a list and you just check it off as you say them. And if you have time, write a little note who they are. Like, oh, this is the bartender at this tavern. This is the mayor. This is the dock worker. This is the tool sharpener. Tool sharpener. Yeah, tool sharpener. Can we go see the tool sharpener? Yeah. Boo. So, jot down NPC names. It saves you time. It makes it seem like you got your stuff together. Side quest prompts. Oh boy, this is something I love to do. It does take some work. Again, front end work. But once you have it done, you just keep it. You keep a freaking booklet of it, and then you just, where are we? Flip, flip, flip. So what my side quest prompts are, and I think I talked about this a little bit in the other video, the map making video. Side quest prompts are literally one sentence, maybe two sentences, just giving you something, some sort of event in whatever place. So, like I said, I break down my maps with forts, villages, towns, and cities. Forts and villages have one prompt, towns have two prompts, cities have three or four prompts. And these are just one line sentences. Is like, the famous chef Podman Uhuhuhu is coming to town. He needs a bodyguard to keep him safe in the city. Or, a torrential downpour has uncovered a hidden hatch that the mud was covering, and you go in the hatch and there's evil. Or, the House of Lords and the Parliament of the Halflings decided that Tuesdays would be are now called Tuesdays for me. I have no idea what that last thing was. It's gonna stay in though, because that's my editing style. Just leave all the crap in. So just like one sentence, two sentence prompts for every place you go. So at the very least you have an idea of what you can do. And so you have basically your quest ready to go, and then you can then build upon that as you need to. Now, what I like to try to do is tie my random improvs back into my main plot of the campaign. And it actually is easier to do this than you might think because, once again, you know your plot. And assuming your plot is a big plot, like if you don't know your plot and they're just kind of adventuring around, then you obviously can't do this. But if you're designing a campaign, which I don't know if I'd say most, but a lot of people design campaigns this way, take you from low level to like 20 or whatever. There are kind of tiers of play, and all the time there is this bigger picture happening, but the players don't reach it till whatever level. I like to tie my side quest, my little seemingly random, unimportant, unconnected quest, I like to tie them back to the main plot in some fashion. So, for instance, my campaign is all about a rivalry between two devils and the stakes of their potential war spilling out into the material plane. The party has been recruited at first unwillingly, and then they kind of it's revealed to them they've been recruited by one of these devils to help him to prevent a disaster from happening. The players are going around collecting fragments of a talisman with the name of the opponent devil on it, and when they put it together, their devil will be summoned to the material plane. They'll have a big fight with them, and while that's happening, the other devil will take over their lair of hell. They're gone. So that's like the big main, like really simple plot. And you can't just overtly, have everything to do with this, but at the same time, this is a major conflict happening. So a lot of things are going to be affected by it. So what I like to do is somehow tie, maybe they go on a side quest and someone in the quest is under contract with one of the devils. Maybe it is as simple as that. There's not much more to it. Maybe there's a that these people are recruiting for the armies, or they're trying to collect talismans, or maybe one finds that a side quest has one of these elements in it, and the party then is able to like, oh, look at all this. Or they, so what I like to do is tie usually a side quest, if there's an evil person or like a bad guy at the end of it, I want to somehow tie them back into the plot. And you don't have to do it in that session, but you can, after the session, you can think about it and how does this person tie or could tie back into the plot so this wasn't just a completely random encounter. Because I kind of play it where like the players are fated to be constantly barraged by this stuff and always be in the thick of it, because the way the campaign started is they were chosen by a celestial being to go on this journey together. So because of that, I like to play into the fate aspect and tie everything together. And you don't have to do this. Some things could just be random, and some things I do are just random. So, but I will tell you, it helps improv if you're tying back into your main plot. And this kind of goes back to knowing the world and the history, except the plot is something apart from that. That's your story. And then the world and history kind of exist on their own. You make it and it's there. Your plot is kind of the present and future, and sometimes the past, kind of floating out here. Can change a bit depending on what the PCs do. But knowing your world, knowing your plot will really help you, like really, really help you get improving down, so you don't have to say, sorry guys, haven't prepared for that. Go ride the kiddie ride instead. you don't have to do it, and you can do that. Don't feel any pressure to jump into this. This takes some amount of comfort on your part with the materials, with the game. And then I have little tricks of how I stall. Stalling for time is an art, and making it seem as though you are completely know what you're doing. You're just something has taken you time. When it was at the table, it was a little difficult to do this because you can't really hide. But now with everything over the line, I can just be like, wait a second, guys, and you look through my notes. What is that name I'm looking for? And while I'm flipping, I'm just kind of in my head thinking, what on earth is going on now? Okay, got it. Okay, and name, go. Or, there's always the I'll be right back, bathroom trip. These are weird tips, but it will help you kind of keep the game, keep the immersion in the game, because a lot of times when if a player can sense you're just BSing or like coming with stuff off the cuff, it kind of ruins the immersion, kind of makes the game inconsequential. So I am all for doing what it takes to put on the airs of the facade, at least, of having everything prepared. I like doing that just because it helps keep the immersion, and the players then really get into it, and they appreciate the time you put into it, and you didn't put in that much time. Isn't that fun? But here's the other thing: you won't have to put in that much time if you put the time in the front. Create your world, create your groups and factions, create your history, know how people interact with each other, know the wounds that still run deep, know the friendships that have been forged for a lifetime, know these, basic things, and know your plot, and you won't really have that much trouble keeping your party entertained with different adventures, even if it's just a one-off. Here we go down this dungeon, see what's going on here. The dungeon has suddenly consequence. It has a place in your world. Who made the dungeon? There's a meaning to it because of XXX in the history, and your players will very much appreciate that they're not just kind of wasting time. And I know that sounds kind of weird because we're talking about a game here, but I think some people love just the sessions that are just totally unrelated and just one-offs, and like, here, let's go ransack this temple or something like that, and there's no consequence afterwards. There's really nothing from it, except some treasure. You maybe get a cool item. But I always want to know, why is that temple there? Why are they going to ransack it? Where does it fit in the world? Where does it fit in your plot? I think that is what makes some superb improv, is when you can tie it back in. So this was a long, meandering video, as they usually tend to be. I'll probably edit some of it. So this is a little about the tips I do, or a little about the tricks I do for improv and D&D. Hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, give me a like, give me a subscribe, show me some love. You know the drill. My goal is to get subscribers. That's my goal. Look at that. I have goals. People. All right, cool. Well, I'll see you all next time.